Forms are everywhere on the internet. Throughout the semester, you have seen me go to Lipsum.com, and this right here is something I have clicked a number of times to get Greek text. This is a form. If we go here, this is a form. Forms have to have some way of getting input from you, like here, and some way of being activated, like here. So a button to activate the form, and at least one field to collect information. So they are used all over the place, including contact forms, and I would like to focus on that example since that's how most of you will be using forms if you're going to use them on your website. So we're going to start out with this table and talk about our first element. So as we learned in the last video, tables need a begin, an open tag, and a close tag. Well, so do forms. So before my table, I'm going to put a form in here and just start it like that. And after my table, I'm going to close my form. So the form is going to wrap the table. See the red box that Dreamweaver's giving us? It's telling us, hey, you know, you've got a form in here. So we don't want to put more than one form on. We want to be careful about that. Now, some other things that the form requires are it needs an action, it needs a method, it could have an ID if you wanted to style the elements within it and you wanted them to be unique, and an encoding type if you need to specify an encoding type. And some of these do require an encoding type. Typically it's this one, the first one here, application/x www-form versus the multi-part data. The action, so the form is collecting information, and then it has to take that information somewhere, whether it's a script on the page itself or whether it's a script somewhere else. So the form tag is wrapping all the information that the form is collecting, kind of like an envelope. And the action is like addressing an envelope. And when you click your submit button, that's kind of like sticking the envelope in the mailbox. And then the action is, you know, like I said, the action is kind of the address. Well, when it gets to its address, there's a script there that'll process it and return a result of some kind or store your information. So right now in this example we don't have our action set up. So if I did anything, if I actually finish this form, currently it would do nothing. It has nowhere to go. So we will start with going to our insert panel here and choosing forms. So here we have a thing that says name. And by the way, we can get a lot more fancier with form fields. If you go to your Visual Quick Start Guide, you can find out about validating your fields, and that would count as extra credit if you look up how to do these spry things and style the messages and the message boxes that come up. That would be an extra feature beyond just putting in the form. But you have a bunch of basic form elements up here, and we're going to work with some of them. If I don't cover something, be sure to go to your Visual Quick Start Guide, Dreamweaver Visual Quick Start Guide, and look up how to use it. But the most common one is your text field. If you think about that Google page we were just at, just type in a term, well, that's a text field. So I've got my cursor where I want it. I'm going to click my text field, and I'm going to give it an ID of 01, and we're going to give it 01-name. Some form processors require you to put an ID in front of, well, like a number or letter so that it knows what order to return the information, and some don't. So I'm just going with that. If you have one that doesn't require that, you don't need the 01, and you only know by experimenting. Label. I already gave a label over here to name, so I'm not going to do a label on this. So a lot of this stuff here that has to do with label doesn't apply to me in this case because I set it up in a table. So there's my first field. It's my name field. I can give it a width here, or I can style it. And some of these fields require a character width and some don't. I don't think this one does, like to validate. So I think that is this text area here, which we'll also deal with in a minute. How did you hear about us? Well, I am going to say that I want this to be I'm going to move this to give us one more question in a minute. How did you hear about us? I want this to be just one answer only. So if I want one answer only, I'm going to go with radio button. And I'm going to say 02 and how did you hear? And this time we're going to say, I think we do have to have the label with this. And wait, did I choose group? I meant to choose radio group. I apologize. Radio group. And wait a minute, we got our one radio button here. We want the group, not the button. Radio group. And there we go. So this can be 02 and how did you hear? So now we're going to have multiple choices. So my first option is going to be friend, and the value is going to be friend. So your label and your value do not have to match. So the thing that the person sees is the label. The value is what gets returned to you either by email or stored in a database. Friend, advertisement. Okay. And let's see, one more. Online. Online. Let's see. Let's do two different kinds of ads. Let's do print advertisement. And online advertisement. Okay. Layout using a table, so we could put a table inside our table cell or line breaks. In this case, I'm going to do line breaks. And there we go. So friend, print advertisement, online advertisement. We have a nice little radio group here. If we want to analyze the code just a little bit so you know what's going on, we have a label. And the label tag is wrapping the input. The input is the actual radio button, and it says type of radio. The name, how did you hear, is an identifier for it. And then the value is what gets returned to you or stored in a database. We also have an ID, how did you hear. So we have this online advertisement, which is just in regular text, which is what the user sees. Okay, so this whole section here is the radio group here. How did you hear about us? And the other thing that needs to happen with a radio group is the name has to be it has to be the same for each one of the radio buttons. So we have name, how did you hear, name, how did you hear, name, how did you hear. ID, you'll see here that we have 02, how did you hear 0, and then 02, how did you hear 1, and 02, how did you hear 2, because that's an ID and it can't be repeated. So this thing right here, this name, makes it where the browser knows, oh, all of these radio buttons are a group. So when I test this here, let's see if it behaves itself. Sometimes I've seen it not. Yeah, that's perfect. Because they all have the same name, I can only choose one. And that's only true of radio buttons. Checkboxes are different. And then, let's see here. Let me see, how may we contact you? And over on the right hand side, we're going to give them a couple options. So checkboxes are different. And I'm going to go ahead with putting in this checkbox group here, but you can choose multiple options with a checkbox. So contact preference. And for the first one, it'll be phone. The next one, it'll be email. The next one, it will be both. Maybe they don't care. And we'll say OK there. All right. And what will happen when we preview this is that we can choose all of them, but I still can only choose one of these. Okay. So those are check boxes. And then what is your question for us? Well, I would like them to be able to write to me. So I'm going to choose a text area this time. And this one I'm going to give an ID of 04 to, and what is the question? So I know what they're answering. I don't need a label because that's going to work as my label on this. And this is the one that I think if you don't give it a character width of some sort and a number of lines, I think you end up getting validation errors. Even though we can style it with CSS, I think it, and you can give it a different width, I think it requires that it has at least this, if not this. Well, number of lines is really important because if I take this to one line, it becomes an input field. So we have to have at least 2 lines for that. But then the character width, I think I've tried not putting it in there because I wanted to set a specific pixel amount, and I think when you do the pixel amount, it overrides the character width, but the code just requires a character width to validate, or at least it used to. So I'm going to say number of lines, 5, and multi-line, that gives it the text area. If we want an initial value, we can specify it. By the way, this will ask if do you want to be a password, so will this. You can put that in. It does not make it secure. It just makes it where you have little stars, so the person who's looking over the shoulder can't see. And lastly, I'm going to put in a button, and I'm going to call this 1, 2, 3, 4, 04, submit, no label tag, and value, submit question. So when I put a value in, it lets me put in whatever I want, and it says, do you want to be a submit or do you want to be a reset? Or do you have some other purpose? I want to be a submit, and then after that I'm going to do another one and call this one 04 reset. And I'm going to say reset and clear form is my value. So that'll just clear my values. That's what clear form does. So that one works. But with this, there's nowhere for this to go. See, it can't do anything. Alright, so that's the setup. If I would like to style these, they are just HTML fields. So this is input, this is also an input, and this is an input, and this is a text area tag. So for this one, because it has and let's see here, an ID of 01 name, I'm going to go ahead and give that a width, and I'm also going to give my text area, where'd you go? Here you are. The same width. So text area is unique. I don't have to do anything special here, but I can just call up the text area tag in my rule. But with this one, if it has an ID of 01 name, I want it to do something. Because if I style the other ones, like over here, if I do input, then if I just say input in general, so here, watch. If I just do input, and text area, they're all inputs except that last thing. And if I give them a width, 200 pixels, and a background color of, we'll just give it pink, or there we go. Now everybody has that width, so that's the problem. So one thing you can do is if you you can go ahead with these inputs. You've got to single them out somehow. So you can either input, like if you only have a couple, you got to figure out what's your lowest common denominator and get rid of that. So like if I had a bunch of text fields here, I wouldn't want to grab all of the IDs. Like say I had 50 text fields, but then I only had one set of radio buttons. Well, then I would create a special rule just for those radio buttons. So let's see. And then look, we've got the input buttons down here too. So in this case, this is the only input I have, and then that I really want that width, and then this I have to create a special rule for to not be that width, and that, and this, and this. So I would rather be more specific with my input field and leave these guys alone. If the opposite were true, if I had more of these, I might go ahead and give the cells that I have these in a special class. Like I might say, okay, if you're TD and you have the class of no width or something like that, then I might create a rule that might look something like this. So if I might create a special class that was like no width and then input. So then for any of the special things like this radio button and checkbox and these guys, I would give their TD that class of no width, and that rule would say something like, you know, width of I don't know, whatever I would want it to be. Maybe this is 10 pixels. Maybe I'd create a special one here for these guys because maybe I want those buttons to be styled differently anyway, which we'll probably do. But you just have to look at it all and go, oh, these are all inputs, so I can't just do input. So this one place where it gets tricky. And there's a lot of different styling you can do with all of this. You just have to decide, you know, you have to like research it and decide what it is that you really want to play with, because styling forms can get tricky. Getting rid of borders and getting your text to show up exactly aligned right in all the browsers, like for buttons, can get a little tedious or inside of fields. But we'll just do some basic styling here. So this particular input form has an ID of 01-name. So I am going to modify this rule. So if it is an input and it has an ID, so no space because this is an ID that is actually on this element. There. So the text area and the input that has the ID of #01-name. That's it. And so those are the only ones that get the funky background color and get that special width. Now for these buttons, if I want to give them a special background color, maybe that's all I want with them, I can see here that I have an ID of 04 submit and 04 reset. So let's just do 04 submit and 04 reset. There is a way you can make these images, these buttons images, and that's probably covered in your Visual Quick Start guide for your HTML. If not, let me know and I'll show you how to do that individually if it's really interesting to you. So I'm going to say for those two, I would like, and these are inputs with that ID, so let me go ahead and get a little more specific with this. No space because it's the ID actually to the tag. And we'll give this a background color, and we'll go ahead with that. I don't know if it's the exact pink, but we'll go somewhere in here. It's not, so we'll go up there. We'll give that red. And then the box, we'll say that we want these to be 100 pixels wide. Apply. There. So we have red buttons, pink buttons for just a moment. And I'm going to go ahead and change that so they match. There we go. I just couldn't remember the exact shade. So there we go. Now where things get funny is if I want to put padding on here or get rid of border, but anyway, this is now a form that's been set up and styled, and the other thing we need to do to it is give it an action. So hold on a minute. Why are you not doing that? I'll check on this and come back to you in the next video, and we'll put an action on it, and I'll see if I can figure out why that background color isn't showing up.